What's up, Culinary Club members? Today you might see some butter in my pan already. We're making crepes. So there's a kind of a lot that goes into this. I think one of the first things you got to think about with crepes is what's going in them. So while this butter melts in the pan, I'll put it off to the side. One filling that I think is really good for crepes is macerated berries. So all that means is you kind of cut your berries up. We cut our berries up and we add a little bit of sugar to them. And what happens is, not only does the sugar sweeten up your berries, but it brings out some of the liquid in it. So you just add a little bit of sugar to it. So when you have enough, when it almost looks right now that your berries are like sandy. They have a little grit to them. And as they sit in the sugar over time, some of the moisture will be pulled out and they'll be much sweeter. Also, another nice topping is a fresh whipped cream, which we'll be making as we go along as well. So, got about a tablespoon of butter in the pan. It's melted. This is going to be going into our batter. So you're going to see me moving this on and off the heat just to keep it nicely melted. To make our batter, everything here is kind of an ish measurement. It doesn't need to be super precise. Texture is more what's important. So we're going to use about 3/4 of a cup of flour. Now this recipe makes enough crepes for 2 to 3 people. So you want 4 to 6, you just double the batter. So we got about 2/3 a cup of flour. We add a pinch of sugar and a pinch of salt. Well, these are sweet crepes. Salt does bring out the flavor in a lot of things. So we got a pinch of sugar, a pinch of salt. We add one egg. One egg, crack it on a flat surface, add one egg. And now here's where you can kind of be a little different. So we need to add water and milk to this to thin it out. If you got skim milk, 2%, 1% milk, you can add only milk and you'll be fine. If you got whole milk, you're gonna want water and milk together just because we want this to be very thin. So I have whole milk here and I'm just gonna add maybe, of course I didn't open my whole milk yet, maybe half a cup of milk. But I'm not gonna add it all at once. I'm gonna add, there's maybe about 1/4 of a cup of milk. And the reason we do that is before we add it all, we want to mix this kind of into a paste. And what this paste lets us do, now this is kind of the texture of, I don't know, this is like the texture of like a heavy cream. It lets the whisk get into the flour particles and break them up before we add the rest of the liquid. Because otherwise what happens is those particles kind of hang out and stay full, stay together, and you won't have, you'll have kind of, what am I trying to say? I didn't have enough flour. You'll have little bits of flour that are suspended in your liquid. Now I'm going to add the water, and I'm going to add maybe about 1/4 of a cup of water. And we mix it all together. And the texture we're looking for is like that of whole milk. So if you get it right, your texture will be about that of whole milk, which is just perfect for what we want. We want a very loose batter. And you can see here, it's kind of hard to see on the camera. It's very, very loose. Okay, and this will be our batter for our crepes. I got, of course, making a mess. Got a little on my burner. So let me wipe that off. Now, Get this butter a little more melted, and that's going into our batter as well. Okay? So while that butter gets a little more melted, a little warming through a little, I'm going to add just maybe a tablespoon of sugar and say half a cup of heavy cream. And what we're going to do, we're going to make a whipped cream out of this. And we'll get back to that as our crepes are cooking. So this butter's loosened up. I'm going to take our butter. I'm going to add it to our batter. Nice and hot. And we'll stir it up. Now, you've added enough stuff in here for the butter not to cook the egg that was in here. And here's our batter. Okay? So, I have a half cup measure for doling out crepes, and this works in my pan right here. Now for our first crepe, you're going to see there's a lot of butter still left in the pan. Normally what happens is when you make crepes, the first crepe never turns out great because there's a lot of butter left in the pan. But that's okay. A lot of people say the first crepe is for the dog. So make sure you share with your four-legged friend at home. I have my half cup measure filled up maybe 3/4 of the way. And when you pour it into the pan, you're going to tilt the pan sideways and pour the crepe batter into the top, swirling the pan around to cover all of it with a very thin layer of batter. So I'm going to pour up here and I'm spinning it around. And we got some butter still in the pan. This is why the first crepe never turns out great. And we're swirling it all around, trying to cover the bottom of the pan. We just put it back down and we're going to let this set up. While I'm making crepes, what I like to do while it's setting up is make my whipped cream. And all we're going to do is we beat our sugar and heavy cream together. All right, and we're going to, the reason I'm doing this not with a hand mixer or something like that is because I want actually a very delicate whipped cream that you'll see kind of at the end. So what you see here, our crepes cooking, since we have a lot of butter in the pan, it's sliding around the bottom of the pan. And these go maybe a minute on one side, 45 seconds to a minute, to get just a little browning. Now, what you might not be able to see, I'll bring it closer, is the side here is pulling away from the pan. And that kind of gives you an idea of when this is starting to get ready to flip. So since it's pulling away, I'm going to flip. Just pick the edge up, turn over and flip. And this is the color we're looking for. There's a little bit of golden brown on here and a lot of very pale color. This is going to sit for another couple seconds. Another couple of seconds. The first crepe I like to cook a little longer on the second side just because of the butter in the pan. And then we just put it out onto a plate. Now, there's a lot of ways to keep your crepes warm and pliable. One way is just to keep piling them on top of each other and letting the residual heat do it for you. So this is kind of ugly. That's why they say it's for the dog. But here we go, we'll go on to the next one. So again, this is, less than half a cup of batter. I pour into the top of the pan. It should sizzle when you pour it in. And when you don't think you quite have enough, you swirl it all around. I'm trying to get this as thin as we possibly can. If you don't have enough batter, you can just add a little bit. Try and get this as thin as we possibly can. Now I need just a drop here. And here we go again. We put it back down on the heat and get back to working on our whipped cream. So you're going for this. There's a lot of different toppings you can do for crepes. Another good one is a little Nutella. Put it in the microwave, make it spreadable. Nutella and bananas is good. You can make a classic crepe Suzette, which requires setting things on fire, so make sure you ask your parents first. And There's a lot of things you can do with crepes. So give us a little swirl in the pan. You see it's releasing. We see our corners are starting to turn over. So we can flip our crepe. Use a little spatula, grab it, and here we go. Here's another one. Now this one's a little pale. That's okay. We'll get some better color on the next few. Now while this cooks, back to mixing my whipped cream. Now for heat, you know, on a 1 to 10 scale, I'm on 7, 6.5, 7. You want to kind of work hot and quick with this. So we do this, we look back at the other side, we're getting some nice color, but we're not quite there, so we'll flip it over again. Now, I know I'm being a little cavalier with touching food in a very hot plate. Please be careful while you do this. You know, comes with experience that the only way to know when you won't burn yourself is if you burn yourself enough times. So, don't go about burning yourself in the name of food. So here we go. We swirl this around. Now this one's a little thick. I have a little too much batter, but that's okay. If you get it right around the corners here, it'll be almost lacy, like a doily, like an old lady doily. That's where the kind of thinness that you want. So, but we're gonna keep going. Gonna let this cook. It's not bad if it's thick. It's just not kind of classic. And I'm still whisking up my whipped cream. All right, we're starting. Crepe's releasing from the pan. We're starting to get a little curl. I'm gonna let it go just a little bit longer to get some better color on it. Now we don't want these like all golden brown, but little spots of browning are really what we're looking for. All right, so we'll make a flip. There we go. That's kind of the color I like, where it's just got a little bits of browning around the edges. You might have to push down your curled edges to get them back in the pan, but that's okay. And once you kind of get to this level where in between crepes, the pan seems really dry. Now you're using a non-stick pan, so it's not going to stick, and you're using, there's butter in the batter, so that'll help it not stick. We're talking maybe 15 seconds in between flipping it over and taking it out. So we go again for our batter. Make it swirl. Give it a little shake. Make sure we cover. All right, so this one's a little better. You can see kind of around the edges the little holes forming, which is what we want. Now these holes in the middle of the crepe, this is primarily bubbles. You can let your crepe batter sit for a little bit if you don't want the bubbles, but it doesn't bother me. So, I'm getting our little curl around the edges. It smells like, you know, brown food, right? It smells like something toasting, right? And that's called the Maillard reaction in cooking. Now this one, we went a little too long on that one side, but that's okay. Again, you're filling these with some deliciousness, so having this all be perfect is not the most important thing. All right, and my whipped cream's almost done. Now this isn't a whipped cream like you'd think about when you spray it out of a can or you get it at a ice cream shop. What this whipped cream is it's almost like a very loose sweet cream, and it's very kind of delicate. It's like a nice different way to have whipped cream. And I'll show it to you in a second. Almost there. This I think is my last crepe. This is all I have the batter for. You can see here, it's kind of just, it drops right off of the whisk, right? There's no kind of peak to it, but it's definitely taken on some air. And it's very soft, it's very nice. And it's just, it's not easy to do with any kind of machine. You kind of have to do it by hand. So this is going, we got our little curl going. Got our little curl. Let me take a peek. Yeah, looking good. Flip it over. Now these little bits, you can kind of just pick right off the pan if you got a decent nonstick pan. I'll just go for another second. And then we have just the last bits that are left. Don't want to waste any batter, but normally your last one, there's never enough to make a crepe. I always call this my abstract crepe. This is also tends to be for the dog. So the dog gets the first and the last crepe, which is fine. So I got little bits I'm scraping up and just flipping this over. So we come back to it. Now these cherries have been in sugar, these berries have been in sugar for like however long this video is, and you can see how glossy they are, how much nicer they are, and they are significantly sweeter. Not only is that the sugar on the outside, but it's bringing out the natural sugars of the berries, and that sugar that was in there dissolves, so it's not gritty like you think it might be. So get that off the heat, turn the heat off. We now have crepes with berries and whipped cream. Let me know how it goes.